in mind. This session is part of our Mental Health Awareness webinar series. Our presenter today is Gilman of the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. My name is Sidra and I'll be your moderator today for Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions you have into the Q&A module as we go, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. I'll now hand it over to our presenter.
Hello, everyone, and happy day after Memorial Day weekend. And thank you, Hawks, for having us here today. My name is Caitlin Gilman, and I'm currently a lecturer at University of North Carolina here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm happy to be a part of Mental Awareness Month or week, or the seminars with Hawks Learning. So I want to just kind of preface a little bit about the presentation today. We've heard some great things from some speakers earlier this month already. And so I'm going to kind of close out the month with a less technical, I guess I should say, topic or formation of the same topic. And hopefully you'll come away with some ideas and strategies to help you that you can put in practice in the classroom that don't take a whole lot of work to kind of work with this massive crisis we have on hand. So let me start sharing my screen. And hopefully you can all see that here. I want to come here, let's hit exit. And we'll start here. All right, so full disclosure, I am a mathematician, so I wish I could make beautiful slides like I have seen this week, or this month, I should say, but this is what we're going to work with. So let me talk a little bit about the freshman mindset. Now, you guys have already heard a lot of really great studies this month. If you've listened to some of the other webinars, and some really good details about technical terms and about ways that we can look at the freshman mindset. So what I did to complement that is I just kind of toned it down a little bit just for what their thinking is, taking away a lot of the technical jargon and things that freshmen may not even know. So as freshmen come to class, some of them, and this you can look at this from a university perspective as well as a community college perspective, that they're alone for their first time. That may mean that they're still living at home and they're just actually carrying on their classes and their coursework alone without hand-to-hand guidance. Or this could mean that they transferred from a high school, which was in a small town community, and lifted themselves up to a large university like we have here in Charlotte. So I always give an example. When my daughter first went to a community college, she did move out. She had trouble with baking toast. I'm not sure what that says about me, but they are learning and figuring out things outside of just school for the first time. And for many of them, their parents aren't there to ask them how their homework is doing, how telling them what time to get to class and when to get back and when to wake up. So there's a lot of new challenges that they're facing. As I mentioned, they could be coming from a small town. They could be coming from a single culture community. So they may not have a lot of exposure um, to different levels of diversity, or haven't seen any customs outside of their own. And so again, if they're going into a large university, this can be really intimidating for them as they try to navigate a more international waters. Mentioning again the time system, I see that, and I think we all do, even as they progress into their sophomore years, they're still learning how to manage their time. Nobody is telling them it's time to get up. Nobody's telling them it's time for you to do your homework. They're starting to learn how to adapt and how to make these changes on their own, and it's not easy. One that I see in both schools, both universities and in community colleges, is the lack of friendship. And if students are coming from high school where they've moved a little bit past the COVID stage and they're able to have friends and some sort of social skills, once they get into college, some of that breaks. They don't see the same faces anymore. And it can be really difficult, especially in a larger classroom. Your freshman classroom may have 150 students, and it's really difficult to find out who's going to be your friend, who's going to be your ally in that class. But the same can be said about students in a small classroom with 15 to 20 students. That first day, there's not a lot of conversation going on. And even depending on how you run your classroom, they're not made a personal bond with somebody by the end of the semester. Again, some of these we have seen throughout the whole month when we're dealing with mental health, but this is just the overall mindset. They are alone, they are afraid, they don't really have the skills. They know they don't have the skills. And so they're coming to an environment where they're having to learn how to be responsible for themselves and their own actions. So again, I just want to remind you, I'm taking this from a very layman term perspective. We've seen some great talks this month with some just really good detail and really technical analysis of the mindset. But this is just a basic where they're coming from. So what we'll talk about today really is a couple ways to change that mindset that you can employ in a large classroom of 150, 300 students, or you can even build into a small classroom of 15 to 20 students, depending on what classes you're teaching. And they don't take a lot of work, because that is some of the pushback I hear from faculty often is, I don't have time to teach my subject material as well as teach mindset and help these students with these skills they should have learned by now. I also hear often, I learned this on my own. I didn't have my teachers teach me these things. Why should I be taking on this additional responsibility? And so these are some things here that we can start implementing pretty quickly, and they don't take a lot of work. We're still able to meet our curriculum guidelines and be able to stay on our paces for what we need to cover in our material, but just tweak things a tiny bit to soften that exposure to what I call the real world. They've stepped away from home in some capacity and made the initiative to come to college. And I know she's checking the text here, so I just check. Okay. So I'm going to start with our syllabus. So again, my slides, I wish I could be more fancy, but as mathematician, we're often straight to a point. But what to do with your syllabus? Students are reading the syllabus now. Not as much as we wish they would, but they do look for it. And oftentimes they only look at their syllabus when they're looking for something as far as grades, or when they're looking to request some sort of a gift of some sort, either attendance, forgiveness, homework forgiveness, extra credit, that sort of things. But I like to go over my syllabus in the first day, and I also like to send it ahead of time in a welcome message. So a couple of things to do with your syllabus that will just start getting them before they even come to class and meet you is when you send your welcome message, whether you do it the weekend before or the day before class, is to have some verbiage in there that softens it a little bit. And let me just exit this full screen here. Oh, I apologize. And show you an example. If I can move this out of the way. Of a syllabus. So here I've highlighted a couple of things that I changed and highlighted that I added to my syllabus after thinking about what students are reading. Again, I teach math, so students are already scared, they're already nervous, and then they get this hardcore document that seems very intimidating, at times almost threatening. Team math. So what I did was I came in, of course, I'm meeting all of my requirements with a big, bold welcome. And I do include that in my welcome email that I send to all my students. And just for a little bit of background, I teach at the university, large classes with 150 students, and I teach at the community college, smaller classes with 18 to 20 students. So that's why I reference between the two. And I always send an email out the weekend before classes start, and it says welcome. And you'd be surprised at just the difference exclamation points make. So I just like to give them a big welcome, and I like to give them a little bit of English language about what math is. Again, some of you will have to zap this for obviously for your field. It may be a little bit more feely than math is, but math is usually very straight to the point. And so here in this first paragraph, I've just added a little bit of an explanation about what math is, why kind of they're here. And I have found that just this initial paragraph kind of just gives them a little bit of an expectation of what to look for. That is aside from the hello, let's start class. This is math. You're going to learn these 5 things and let's move on. I also sprinkle through my syllabus with just some kind words, some be patient, be prepared to be frustrated. But also, we're going to have some accomplishments. And I put some things in here like that just to soften the verbiage. And this is something, again, that anybody can do. And it does not take much time. You don't have to create a new syllabus. You just go into your current syllabus and look where you can add some softening touches. I'm still capturing, as you'll see through the points that I need. I'm not being too flexible to make it so that anybody can get through the class. I do like to put some information about myself, and this is where I think some students, some faculty get really nervous about sharing. Students, if they know that you're a person too, then they just feel more comfortable. And that's the end goal, is to make our students feel comfortable in class. I'm not looking to be best friends with my students. I'm not looking to carry the burden of, or no, I shouldn't say burden, but I'm not looking to carry the weight of the responsibility of their lives outside of class. But I want to acknowledge that I am a person as well, and I recognize them as humans in my classroom, not students for me to dictate to. So there's nothing too personal in here. There's nothing I'm uncomfortable with sharing with anybody else. But I let them know, hey, us teachers, us faculty, professors, doctors, whatever title you want to give to us, we're people too. And whether we like to admit it or not, we've been nervous. We've felt fear. We have felt frustration learning something. Everybody feels frustration learning something for the first time. And so I like to just let them know that I empathize with what they're coming from, and I recognize where they're coming from and that they're seen in my classroom. And then, of course, I do always add just a little bit of a personal thing. I'll have students come to me. For example, today I had a student mention to me that he was excited to see I was a marathon runner because he's running his first marathon in October. And it just makes a connection. And that's my goal with dealing, part of my goal with working with the freshman mindset and this anxiety and this frustration and depression that they're going with is to make a connection with them, to let them know they're not alone on this journey. Same with dogs and cats. I'm a big animal lover. I've turned this into a fun thing because I have so many students in my university class. I don't get to know them well. So I ask them if they have an animal or if they have some sort of hobby or something important to them. If they have time on their exam, they will draw me pictures. So I get lots of pictures of students, their animals that they have. And last semester, I had a student who didn't have an animal, but she loved dinosaurs. And so she drew me a dinosaur. And these things sound outside of the box. They sound, well, that doesn't relate to math and learning, but it gives an environment where the students feel safer. They feel more comfortable. They feel like they have somebody in some way that they can communicate with, even if that is just drawing a picture and sharing their love of dinosaurs. And I think she's checking though as well, but we'll just make sure we're okay. All right, thank you. Um, as mentioned before, going through here, we still have the same information. I'm not taking away anything. I think in another talk that I listened to for the mental health month, there's concern that we are making things too soft and too comfortable, that we're not challenging students. And I did not take out any of those requirements from my students. Here, I let them know this is what's expected from you. So the same thing, I did not take away hours that they're required to work, what their responsibilities are, but I do let them know, hey, students work to different paces. And I do mention that often in my class. Some of you are going to get this right away, and some of you are going to have to work harder. That's just the nature of human society. We all don't learn the same thing at the same pace. And again, I remind them, be patient, be patient. Our typical things here, again, I'm not taking away anything from the grading scales. Here I did highlight something in orange because I wanted, oh, I'm sorry. Again, the orange is the positive. We'll talk about the blue in a moment. But here is I changed why attendance is important. And this is a difficult one for me because a lot of my students tend to, in the larger class, think I don't need to come. There's 150 students. What difference does it make if I come? They are freshmen who usually, some of them have never had to study before. They don't feel like they have to come to class. And so I just explain a little bit about why it's important. And I always include us working together. So this may be a little bit too fluffy for some folks in your field, but I have found that addressing this issue by explaining why the expectation is there, explaining that freshmen tend to struggle with coming to class and therefore struggle with being successful. And that's why we focus on this. Excuse me. So here I've highlighted a blue portion, which has not been kind of cleaned up. It is very straight attendance. If you miss so many days, you will fail the class, and it's capitalized. And here, but though, if you are late to class, it will count. And if you miss workshops, we'll talk about in a minute, your grade will be dropped. And so I was wondering if you guys could take a moment to look into the chat and put ways that we can still have a strong attendance policy, still have penalties and consequences, but a softer way to say these. Yes, I have no problem with sharing my syllabus. But if you just take a moment and type into the chat, I think you should be able to see them there. Just different ways that we can make this better rather than the way it looks here. And I don't know if it's going to update for me automatically. Okay, I'm not sure if it will come through the chat while I have it here. Here we go. Here we are. Thank you. So given bonus points. So then start thinking about how you would word that in here. Allow them to drop their lowest test grade. That's a good one too, especially if you have multiple tests in your class. So instead of a penalty, it looks like there's a lot of folks looking at it as a positive, as a reward. We could change the order of the bullets. Yes, I like this a lot. You are expected to attend, but things come up. That is recognizing that they have a life, and that as much as we want school to be the most important thing for them, it's not the most important thing for us. Even though it feels like it sometimes, hopefully, my dogs come first. Everybody who knows me knows that. But recognizing that some of them or most of them are between 18 and 22. This is not their priority. A lot of them are just figuring some things out in life. So highlighting bonus points. Yep. Taking attendance and class activities. Yeah. Yes. But I'm not a monster. That's a good one. So there is always that balance between the flexibility and being say, I am a human too. The reason but I'm firm too. And the reason I'm showing you this is in 4 years, you're going to be in the real world and your boss isn't going to say, well, it's okay. You were tired today. So there's a ton of them in here. Some things that I noticed when I first looked at this syllabus is for me, it was this capitalization that just, okay, something bad is going to happen to me. And I just thought that there might be a nicer way to keep this policy, but phrase it differently. And it could be something as Here are a list of bullet points about how our attendance is taken. Be mindful that there are strong consequences for this, but I have built some flexibility into the policy because I know things come up. So it's just a different way of wording it. Um, Communication is your responsibility. I do like that. It is their responsibility, especially in my larger classes when I have 150 students. They have to communicate with me because I'm not going to know them all like I would in a smaller class. But I also think that that could be worded differently. As in other words, it is important that you communicate to me if anything comes up as soon as it comes up. And that way I can work with you to see if there's anything that can be done. But know that my syllabus at this point is firm or some sort of verbiage of that sort.
There is a
Here is,
question.
yes.
How do you add this on Canvas when you are taking attendance?
How do I add this policy on Canvas?
Yes.
So this is in my syllabus and oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. So for this policy in real life, I am pretty hand wavy with it. I have it there really to support me. In my smaller classes, I just do it by hand. I take roll, I actually call out my student's name in class and I mark it down and I keep track of it. In my larger classes, I'm lucky that I have a teaching assistant and they will take attendance for me. They will keep this on the spreadsheet. For the classes where I've not had a teaching assistant and I wanted to be firm with this, then I do that. I take Canvas and I export it into a spreadsheet. And then every week I update their attendance grade or their attendance in there, which is a little bit more manual. But usually what I have found, which isn't always the case from semester to semester, is if I'm firm but kind when I'm mentioning the attendance policy and I take it at least the first month or so very regularly and very strictly, the students kind of see that, hey, this she's serious about this. And fortunately, for the most part, I don't tend to have problems the rest of the semester. Smaller classes, obviously, it's very easy because if you get to know your students pretty well, you know when you're there. And in some cases, I will reach out to a student who has been showing up, who has stopped showing.
Thank you. There's one other question. Do you get any pushback from athletes who must miss class for travel on the 5 bonus points on the final exam policy?
That is a great question. So for athletes, and I also have students who are in theater or in the orchestra. If it is school sponsored event, they have a note that they can fill out. We have a student support system or a support department who will send me notification. And also usually I get a letter saying these students will be out these days. And I don't even count them as absences. They're just completely like just an ignored day. So I don't use it to penalize them. And as long as they don't miss the other days for personal reasons, then they are counted 100% present.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I will talk about workshops coming up, but the point of the rest of this email really is, again, to show you some contrast. Here is another one where it's very firm, no makeup work, unless there is extenuating circumstances. So I still think for me, some of the verbiage of this should still be in here, but it can be tweeted or changed a little bit depending on your population. So for example, at my community college, I teach a lot of folks who have 2 or 3 jobs or have families at home. And so they're going to be absent. Some of them really are in financial need and may have trouble even getting to class. So when it comes to some of my population, I want to make sure I'm flexible enough that I'm not penalize students who are really making the effort, but just have some really serious things outside of their control. So both for the late makeup, for the late work, and for my attendance, I try very hard to be firm, but inside know that I'm somewhat flexible given some student situation. For example, I had a student last year whose brother committed suicide, and I waived those attendance those missed attendance without question with the documentation. So I think that you kind of get the gist of it, just putting in some tone here and there. And when I go over the syllabus on the first day, I make sure to alter my tone and my verbiage as I'm going through, so that when it comes to being afraid of the class and being afraid of the work, I try to soften down a little bit and let them know I recognize that this is not an easy class. But then when it comes to things that I really don't have control over, the makeup, and when I say don't have control over, these are my policies. I'm not changing them. That I take a little bit of a firmer stance. So hopefully looking at that is helpful. And let me slide that out of the way and get back to where we are. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay, so that's our syllabus. Welcoming students this is just a short little tidbit here of things that we know, but we get so busy. We get so busy. It is so hard. And sometimes we are having a bad day and it is so hard to fake it. I had a career before I came back to school to be a teacher, and it was a pretty stressful career, but there's been nothing like teaching where you are just presenting and always have to have your game on. So there's a couple things I did, because when my first time teaching, I was on a stage looking down at all my students, and it just felt uncomfortable. So for my larger classrooms, the first day of school, I like to be what I call down on the floor. I like to be off the stage. Usually, if I don't have a class beforehand, I try to get to class. Our classes have 15-minute breaks. I try to get there right after the other class gets out, especially during the first couple of days of school, and welcoming people and walking around and ask them how they're doing, or are they finding their classes okay. And you can't see me sitting down, but I'm kind of short. So sometimes they think I'm a student in there with them, which I will take as a compliment. Um, but I like to talk to the students as they're coming in. They do not always like to talk to me as they're coming in. Some of them are very uncomfortable. Some of them are still learning how to talk to adults. I try to smile a lot. Um, and what I also do is, not just the first day, but for the whole semester, I do try to get there early and I try to walk around. And what I have found is you'll have some that will talk to you each day or each week. And I try my larger classes to walk around and get to the people who may not speak, because maybe they're just a little bit more shy. And it's just little things. I ask about the weekend. I ask what they're doing here in school and how it's going. And during class, and here I'm still focusing on my large classes, I try to incorporate active learning, which is very difficult in a lecture classroom for me with that many students. But when it is time for them to work together on a project or work together on an assignment, I will get off the stage and come down with them. And be careful with that, because there's pros and cons, because with that number of students, you're not going to get to everybody. And so sometimes I feel like I've left some students in the dark, but I do like to get down there and I alter my path when I come down. In my smaller classes where the whole classroom is not filled up, I like that I can sit down beside a student, or I can just hover down and sit beside them one-on-one, especially with math where I need to look through their work. And just these little things of being part of their class, not the dictator of their class, but a part of their class, I think really makes a difference. So I think most people who are teachers kind of incorporate this because we just like to talk. For my large classes, I always stay a few minutes after. Actually, I do in all my classes, because some of our students are taking 5 or 6 classes or have 2 or 3 jobs, and that might be the only time they have to talk to me. And if I have a class right after mine, I usually will end my class about 5 minutes early so that I have that time to meet with them. And I tend to have a line of students after class waiting for little things like, I'm not going to be here next week. What can I do? And things of that nature. Sometimes I just have students to stay that want to talk to me, which I take as a good sign. Okay, so we're right about halfway mark. So I talked a little bit about sharing your story already. And there's so many workshops on understanding your story and the pieces of your intersection of who makes who you are. But I, depending on my class, I share a lot or I share a little because I've had a very adventurous life that has let me here. And as we all have here, we've overcome challenges, rather big or small. We have also faced a time in our life where we were scared, and we have all been 18, 19, not knowing if we're going to be successful in life. And success can be measured many different ways. And so I do, usually what I do is about 2 to 3 weeks into class, sometimes after the first test, we normally have 4 tests in my class, is I just kind of break down and I share a time in my life that I didn't think I could make it and that I had to not give up on myself. And depending again on my class and where I feel comfortable, sometimes I share more details and sometimes it's more of a broad understanding that don't quit on yourself and you're not alone. I know what it feels like to be scared. I know what it feels like to get an F on my first test and being scared to come home or to feel terrible about myself. I know what it feels like to study, 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 study and still get an F on a test. And of course, I'm referring this to academia, but we all have done many things. Some of us have failed our driver's license test twice. And so just I try to find something to share with them that lets them know again, they're going to be okay. I'm okay. I've made it. They're going to make it. And that can be the only difference they need is somebody believing in them. And I will say, and I'm pausing here on this slide because it was my community college math teacher, and I randomly took a pre-calculus class. I was a theater major, believe it or not, who changed my life. And I believe without a doubt that without that person being by my side in a minimalist role, I would not have had the successful career that I had in my life. And I wouldn't be here today as a teacher, which I find is an honor to be without him. So never underestimate humanizing yourself and what that can play on their mindset. You don't know what's going on in their home. You don't know what's going on in their life. And they can have come from a wonderful life. And sometimes it just takes somebody else to believe in them and to encourage them to change their stars. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about workshops. Now, we built these at University of North Carolina in Charlotte with the Center of Teaching and Learning. So I had a lot of resources, and it was a group of us that built these. And what we did was we changed our math class from a 3 hour to a 4 hour class for our college algebra, which is our largest class. And we built in this extra hour, which is a workshop. A lot of community colleges will call this the co-rec, and sometimes they're called a lab. Now, I'll have to remember as I go through here to let you know that I can adapt this and have adapted it for a typical class where I don't have a separate workshop. But because of the mindset of the students, particularly after COVID coming in, which you've heard about if you've attended any of the other workshops from Hawks Learning this month, is just really, really tough. They're kind of all over the place and they're kind of feeling alone. And so in 150 student classroom, they're not getting the help that they need and they are very afraid to ask questions. And so we built workshops where we divided the class. So if I have 150 students, we would take them and divide them into 4 or 5 workshops. And in those workshops, we are lucky that we have graduate teaching assistants and they're paid for through their funding, their stipend for going to school. And we have them teaching. And they are a separate classroom time, a separate classroom altogether, and the teaching assistant teaches it, just like you might see in a computer science lab. And forgive me, humanities, I'm all STEM, so I haven't taken a humanities class in a long time. But most STEM classes will have some sort of lab component, and a lot of times it is taught by a teaching assistant. And again, I will mention here how I can adapt this to a regular classroom. And here were the goals. The initial goals were, of course, we see the gap in the learning material, but more importantly, we see a gap in the social skills. And so the initial design was to help build the algebra skills to get them where they needed. But while building this, we uncovered this is a great place, since we have this population of freshmen, to build a community, to give them a safe spot to make friends, to something smaller that they're more used to, like in high school. And let me take a second here to pull it up. I believe I want to pull this up. So what we did with our goals of the workshops was we had a little mini lecture. We had students solve problems on the board. They were divided into groups for the whole semester, so they became friends and communicated with one another. And I built in some mindset activities. So let me escape from this large one and show you a copy of a workshop. Let me get this out of the way here for you. Excuse me, I'm going to show you more than what you might need, because again, a majority of this is done in kind of a separate classroom. But I'll leave this here and tell you how I adapted this for my regular class. So my regular class, 3 or 4 hours credits for the semester, is in my regular class, I will just have a separate little guide for myself. So this is a guide I made for our teaching assistants. And where it really comes into the freshman mindset is the whole idea is to help build their confidence in math, but also we built some growth mindset activities in here. And so if I show you forgive me, the worksheet, and I know it's math, so bear with me. What I did, or what we did as a group, is we took out some of the verbiage of math and turned it into English. And we did this specifically with the mindset of the students in mind, in our mind, because we wanted them to start seeing something that they're more familiar with. Now, not every student is afraid of math and uncomfortable with math, but typically for my population, they're not in my algebra class unless they have suffered with math concepts at some point of time. So the purpose of the actual math work portion is to build comfort in their mind that they know what these things are, that they can understand these words. Because if you don't know what this word is, they can Google it versus the symbols that they might have trouble. And they do these in groups. So normally we have some students who are stronger, and we encourage them to really help and to teach their group and work together. And then I have pieces where they refer throughout the workshop the work back to their majors. And again, it sounds very mathy and it sounds very objective driven for the goals I need to meet in my class. But what we have found is it's changing their mindset. It's not seeing our class as a separate entity, it's seeing our class tied in with our overall majors and goals. But the more important part is our growth mindset activities. And so I have this worksheet that each workshop the students take, and it's once a week. They have these worksheets here. So how I've incorporated this into my classes where I don't have a co-rec or I don't have a lab is usually about once a week, I carve off time. Yes, that makes it a little difficult. Either I have to speed demon through my other material or they have to self-learn some material. But I pull out growth mindset activities. How I built these is just doing some research, and I want to use that term loosely. It's not anything published, it's not anything formalized, just looking through on what is important, what activities help students break away from that fixed tough mindset. And so my first one each week, or each semester I should say, deals with what is mindset. Now, if you have a large population of students, or maybe even if you don't have a large, even if you have 20 students in your class, some of them are going to find this very juvenile. And I address that up front. Some of you may have seen this, and some of you may think it's very elementary. However, research has showed it does help. And because I had 20 years in corporate world before I came back to school, I let my students know some of these activities are actually done in the corporate world and training. But here, the first one, and you can copy this, or I can send link to you is a cute little video. I find it darling. But again, some students find it a little juvenile, but it is about fixed versus growth mindset. And then they work on this. And what I do with these growth mindset activities is maybe this week it's the first week and I have them work alone. And then next week when we do our workshop or worksheet, however it works for your class, I have them work in pairs or I'll have them work with their group. So some of them will be individualized because you'll find some students are very, very adverse to sharing, but the whole purpose is to create a community. So they're going to have to share at some point. And it doesn't take that long. Sometimes what I have found when I started this is I really wanted the mindset piece to take about 15 minutes. Now for the class where they don't have a workshop is usually about half of our class once a week, which I know is a lot, but if they're finding value in it, I'm going to continue to work with it. And here is what the students see. We made PowerPoints, which isn't really necessary, but they watch the video and they can work through different mindset activities. And this is the first one because I like them to see right away. And I apologize, you can see from our notes here, but I like them to see right away that they have potential to grow. And here is the second one, just so you can see the differences. This one is dealing with SMART goals. And again, I put a video here. Not all of them have videos. This one really talks to them about how to build goals, how to set strategies to achieve them. And each one has a corresponding worksheet. And they can access it with their little QR code and they can talk about it. This one I like to hone in on them because this one I have used I have taken the SMART Goals workshop so many times in corporate world. So it still comes up. It's still in the training they're going to face in the corporate world. And then just to show you some of the mindsets I have built in here are dealing with math because that's what I teach and that's what my students are afraid of. And so we have one for math mistakes, math test taking skills. And it's just again just changing their mindset between I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it to I made a mistake, I messed up, and we learn from failure. Without failure we would not grow. So each one of these, yes, they work in their groups and they talk together, and I see it evolve throughout the semester. The first workshop they want nothing to do with it. A couple of them will laugh, and your good students humor you because you're the teacher and they don't want to be disrespectful. But usually before the halfway mark, there's a definite shift where even if they find it funny, the little pictures I put in here or the little video silly, we laugh together. But the idea is coming across and I see the change in the mindset. I see the students start to say, I'm not going to quit on myself. I'm not going to give up. So how you can create these, again, I'm a mathematician, so the creative folks out here, I'm sure can do a much better job making them look pretty. But I simply went for some of these and said, I went to Chat GPT for some of them and said, I need some help in creating a mindset activity specifically for math people or specifically for this particular topic. And that's how I was able to create some of these. So I know there are so many questions I've been missing. So I apologize. Yeah. Yes, I like that. If you shoot for the moon, you'll at least hit the Empire State Building. If I'm not allowed to offer buffer points, that's good too. That's going back. Duckworth mindset, yes. And TED Talk, yes. I shied away a little bit from the TED Talk, and again, everybody's different because I tend to have students roll their eyes when they see TED Talk. So I don't have a school age student in my household. Like my daughter's a grown. I passed my driver's license 3 times. Very good. So I don't know what they're learning, but I got the impression they'd seen a lot of TED Talks. So I personally moved away from that. Here's an example of these. And yes, I can share these as well. But they were pretty easy to build. And again, this is coming from somebody who is not strong in building these things. And they're not fancy. They're not anything. It's really what my whole goal for all of dealing with all of the negativity that and the depression and the frustration and the weight that the freshmen are coming to us with is just to make the environment better for them. I'm not going to fix their problems. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a math teacher. But if I can make my space a space where they feel safe to try new things and to give their best, whether that's a pass or fail or what, then I feel like I have done part, and I have seen it. I have seen it for students. I have had students come back to me and say, I just really didn't think I was going to ever be good at math. And now I don't know why, but you're teaching, I am. I'm better. I'm good at it and I understand it. And I promise you guys, I am not a special teacher. I'm not, I guess I'm a good teacher. The students just tend to tell me that a lot, but I'm nothing special. It's just creating an atmosphere that I believe in them. And for some of them, I may be one of 100 people that believe in them. But for some of them, I may be the only one that has told them that I believe in them. And so all of these mindset activities, they seem, and the syllabus and these pieces, they seem separated, but the overall goal is really just to create a place where the students feel like they can grow and they can be something and they're not going to be judged. And that's a safe place to fail. I tell them that a lot. And before I will say this, and I do tell my students this, and this is not made up. My daughter is an artist. Imagine that, a math parent with an artist. She failed algebra 3 times between high school and community college. 3 times. And she never gave up. And the fourth time she passed. Is she going to use any of that in her job? She does not at all. But she didn't give up and she has a wonderful job and she's very happy. And so but do I think my daughter's dumb because she failed algebra? Not in the least bit. In fact, she's more creative and smart in arts than I ever could be. So I do tell my students that because that's the message I'm sending. So I know I'm getting close to time here. So I do want to say, with all of this in mind, this whole mental health month that we've had, and we've talked about the challenges that students are facing because of COVID or just because of the environment they are in. And we face challenges too. But I do think that this generation coming up is really just having a hard time. I've never had so many students have somebody commit suicide or their brother or sister kidnapped, or some of the things I hear is horrible. That being said, if we dumb it down for them, if we say, okay, you can turn in every assignment late, it's fine, or you don't need to do that assignment, or you failed the test, I'm going to let you make it up until you don't fail it anymore. That just penalizes them even more. A lot of them already know, they have heard people say this generation is lacking in skills. This generation does not have social skills. They are not as educated as the one before. They hear this all the time. And so I tell my students, I don't give makeup tests. You can't test corrections. I have to challenge you and you need to rise to that challenge. And I believe that you can. And towards the end of my class, I still tell them, I still believe you can. If you're failing my class and you don't think you're going to pass it this semester, it wasn't the semester for you. I still believe that you can do it. Don't give up on yourself. They always put my survey. Miss G says that one thing we can't do in our class is give up. If she doesn't give up, we don't give up. I see that a lot and it warms my heart. But some of the roundings I've seen, curves, extra credits, it hurts my heart because they know we're dumbing it down for them. And when we do that, we're saying that we don't believe that they're capable of doing the things that we were able to do or that other countries are expecting of their students. So I'll say kind of in my closing is that one of the best things we can do for their mindset is challenge them to rise above it. challenge them to rise above the situations going on in their life, because situations are always going to happen. Maybe this year is a good year for me and it's a tough year for you. Maybe my whole life is great and you have a lot of struggles in your life. It's okay. Don't quit on yourself and you're going to make it. And that's where I leave with this challenge to the students. Don't make them less than they already feel like they are. And here's just my little closing slide, because we're supposed to usually have closing slides. um, but that's really my thoughts, and I will come back to the very first page on things that you can do that, as you see, they're not technical, they're not fancy, they don't require us to have a very advanced knowledge and research in this area, that can make a difference in the mindset of our freshmen. So I will pause for Q&A. Is that right?
Yep, go ahead and drop any questions you have um, for Caitlin in the chat box or in the Q&A module, and we will be sure to answer them.
I'm stealing this, Eric. If you shoot for the moon, you'll usually hit the top of the Empire State Building. I'm stealing that. My very first teacher training, they said to me, the best teachers are the best thieves. How I will share with Hawks and they can distribute for the syllabus. I'll just need to take out my class information. And thank you all very much. Would you like me to stop sharing now?
Sure. All right. I don't think there are any other questions. Thank you, Caitlin, for this impactful webinar, and thank you all for attending today. We will be emailing you a link to view the recording of this webinar once it's available. And this concludes our last webinar on Mental Health Awareness Month series. Please make sure to check our curated mental health resources for education in the website, which I'm going to go ahead and link in the chat now, which is also where you can view the recording. If you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposals to the Learning and Growing website, which I've also linked in the chat for easy access. These free webinars are brought to you by Hawks Learning, an innovative educational courseware company. To learn more about our mastery-based course materials and how Hawks can enhance learning outcomes for you and your students, please visit hawkslearning.com, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.